Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. So this is an extended version of a video I've already done, which is all about how to extend your focal length. I did a very short video that was only 60 seconds. I will put a link in the description box if you just want to go and watch that. It's the quickened version of this video, but I wanted to do another video to explain how to increase your focal length. So there's a few ways of doing that. So here we've got my prime 300 2.8L lens, an EF lens, not an RF lens, and it's 300mm, and that is quite short for sports photography. But we can extend our focal length or our perceived focal length, which is basically your angle of view. So the narrower that your angle of view, the more telephoto your lens becomes. So like a 5-degree angle of view, like on a 500mm lens, is quite a narrow field of view. And obviously you can increase your effective focal length by using crop sensor cameras. But let's talk about how to increase our focal length. So the first thing you can do is you can crop your images, which is basically zooming in digitally and cropping. And what you're doing is removing some of the data to get closer to your subject matter, but that comes at a cost at losing megapixels. So that's cropping. Now we could talk about obviously I use an R6, which is only 20 megapixels, but if you were to use an R5, which is a 45 megapixel camera, you're getting basically double the megapixels. So in effect, you got a 2 times extender built into an R5. So it allows you to crop a lot more than you can on a 6D, for example. Even the newly released R6 Mark II is only 24 megapixels, so it increased to 4 megapixels, which isn't a big deal, is it? So another thing you can use is extenders. So I have a 2x here. 2 times extender on a lens like this will get me to 600mm, but I lose 2 stops of light, which means obviously it's 600mm at f5.6. So obviously we're losing 2 stops of light. However, I do find when we use 2 times extenders, the image does degrade a little bit. It's not as dramatic as you would expect if you were to use this on a zoom lens, because prime lenses tend to be overall quite a bit sharper in the corners and a little bit sharper in the centre. You don't tend to notice the difference in the centre, but you do notice it in the corners. And I have noticed that a lot of RF zoom lenses aren't that much better than the EF variants in the corners. Slightly better controlled chromatic aberration, more green than say magenta was in the EF lenses. That's your main difference really, the EF lenses versus the RF. I don't see it being worthwhile to sell your EF lens and get an RF lens if it's all about image quality. Are there other benefits to the RF glass? Yeah, you get better autofocus speed and better stabilization, of course, but those are not related to the actual image quality. So obviously we've mentioned we can crop to achieve a tighter angle of view, and obviously we can use an extender. Now this is obviously a 2 times, so we lose 2 stops of light. I have another one here which is a 1.4. The 1.4s, I don't see any major difference. In fact, when you compare cropping to using a 1.4, there's virtually no difference. However, if you do crop, ladies and gentlemen, you'll find that your cropping an image is a tiny wee bit sharper than say using the 2x. So that's another difference, obviously. So obviously you've got 3 main ways of extending your focal length. One is to crop, one is to use full frame extenders, and another is to use an APS-C camera. So if I just turn over here we have the R7. Now this is a crop sensor APS-C censored camera, and it gives me 30 megapixels. I think it's 32 megapixels approximately. in terms of its crop factor is 1.6. So on a typical 300mm lens, we're going to get 480mm, and I believe with a 1.4 extender you're going to get 670mm, which is quite a lot of focal length. But remember, the thing with the APS-C is you don't lose any stops of light, but you do with obviously the extenders. However, keep in mind that when you use APS-C, you do have a little bit of change in depth of field. Depth of field isn't quite as good as you get in full frame, and that's the main disadvantage of using a smaller sensor. Your depth of field changes a bit. So basically, we've got three ways of changing our focal length. One is to crop, one is to use extenders, and one is to use an APS-C camera. I wouldn't recommend using the 2x extender with APS-C, and if you can get away with it, probably not use the 1.4, because with any full frame lens you use, APS-C is very taxing on full frame lenses in terms of the optics, and APS-C has a good way of figuring out how sharp a lens is, because if you can render good images on APS-C, your lens is incredibly sharp. Obviously you can put it on full frame and get sharp results, but if you can get away with sharp results on APS-C, your lens is super tack sharp. There's no doubt about that. The one thing that is not talked about a lot when using full frame versus APS-C, and that is the difference between diffraction. Diffraction is when you start using higher apertures such as f16, f22 to get more depth of field. Unfortunately, on full frame you can get away with limited diffraction, but on APS-C that diffraction is multiplied significantly, and I wouldn't want to use anything above f8 on APS-C. Just because diffraction comes into your images a lot sooner than it does on full frame. In fact, on full frame you can get away with f22 quite easily, but I wouldn't want to go beyond f8 with APS-C because diffraction can affect your images. So that's basically the main ways of extending your focal length. Another thing to do is obviously get closer to your subject matter. A lot of people, and there's a lot of talk on the internet obviously about these super zoom lenses, especially with Canon releasing the RF 200 to 800 f9 lens. In my opinion, that's a very dark aperture and it's not really usable in forests or dark situations, sunrise, sunset. It's not really ideal for those situations. In good light it's going to be good, but unfortunately that dark aperture of f9 is going to be very difficult to use in the field for fast moving subjects. Because you need high shutter speeds. You need at least 2000 per second, and I don't like ramping up my ISOs to a huge number in order to achieve fast action with those tiny apertured lenses. They're very, I've got the over here I've got the f11 800mm RF lens. I find it very, very challenging. I tend to be getting shutter speeds of around 500th of a second if I'm lucky in the UK where it's overcast a lot, and that's not fast enough for fast action. Or if you do aircraft photography, that's not going to be fast enough, unfortunately. Even the 7.1 aperture of the 100 to 500 RF lens can be limiting, and I'll give you a scenario. I was filming in the Royal Armouries a few years ago, and I was using the 100 to 400 Mark II EF lens at 5.6 aperture, which is a reasonable good aperture. However, I did have problems with it being quite dark, heavily overcast. It was almost dark in terms of overcast because there was thick cloud cover, and I had to resort to using a 2.8 apertured 70 to 200 lens. Unfortunately, that doesn't give me the focal length I needed to get the fast action of the two horses jousting each other and knocking each other off the ground. I've done a video of that event that I did. I'll put a link in the description box if you want to go and watch that. Very interesting, and I enjoyed my time doing it at the Royal Armouries in Leeds in the UK. A very famous place that a lot of people go to. Quite often they run events and jousting events, and you know, it's a nice place to go and visit. Anyway, so yeah, sometimes you need the big apertures, unfortunately, and they cost a lot of money for that very reason. I think a lot of times when people want the big aperture lenses, it's because they let so much light in. So basically, a 2.8 aperture lens lets 4 times more light in than an f4 lens does, and the further you move along, such as 5.6, f8, f16, every time you're moving along, you're talking about 4 times more light for the previous aperture. So just remember that, guys. So that's the main ways of increasing your focal length, is to basically crop, use extenders, and use an APS-C crop sensor camera. As Sigma would say, to increase your effective focal length. Doesn't mean you're actually increasing your focal length, it's just your perceived focal length changes because of your angle of view. And remember, when you use full frame lenses versus using an APS-C camera, your depth of field will change a little bit as well. So just take note of that. And also remember compression, because zoom lenses compress as well. So that's another way of sort of narrowing your depth of field effectively. So you know, it is possible in certain situations to achieve out of focus backgrounds with an f11 lens. It just takes technique and knowledge on how to achieve that. Normally you need to get down low and your background needs to be some distance away from your subject to achieve out of focus backgrounds. However, if there's something behind your subject matter, then unfortunately you need a large aperture lens to achieve out of focus backgrounds. So I hope that you found this video informative, and hopefully I explained that in more depth regarding what you need to achieve or need to do in terms of increasing your focal length. In regards to my giveaway that I'm giving, one of those adapter things, I don't think have I got one here? Yeah, I'm giving away, because I've reached 1,000 subscribers recently, a wide angle adapter you can attach to any sort of small lens you've got to give you a wider field of angle of view. So I've offered a £20 Amazon voucher or one of these. It's up to you which you choose. All you've got to do, ladies and gentlemen, I've changed it a little bit. Basically, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel and you leave a comment in the 1,000 subscriber video, I'll do a competition where we'll look at all the comments and we'll put it into some software that will randomly choose someone. I won't choose it myself, the software will choose one of you guys, and obviously the winner can choose either one of these wide angle lens adapters or a £20 Amazon voucher. And I think that's going to be a nice giveaway, and I'll be doing that draw in a couple of days, ladies and gentlemen. I said I'd run it for 7 days, and you know, basically that'll be available for you guys. If you haven't already liked this video, please remember to do so. I would highly appreciate it, and please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you find this video helpful and beneficial to inform you on focal length. It's very interesting. Focal length isn't always king though, and that's something I think it's important I get to you, some information over to you guys so you can understand that. Getting closer is the answer, not huge focal lengths like 800mm. So a lot of people think because they've got a big focal length that they can zoom into something far away and get a good sharp image. Unfortunately, the atmosphere is always going to be working from you, whether it be heat haze or thermal drafts or cold weather fronts moving in. These things will affect your images. Also, keeping your lens in a warm car won't help either if you're in a cold environment, because your lens needs to climatize to the climate that you're in. and that can take a few hours sometimes. And a lot of people have commented and said, my lens isn't very sharp. Why? There must be something wrong with it because I'm getting, soft images. It's because your lens needs to acclimatise to your environment. And just using a super zoom lens isn't always the answer. Getting closer is the key thing. If you can get closer, get closer. I know there's some environments and situations where you can't physically get closer, like you don't want to get close to a lion, or there's glass or fences in the way that you can't actually get past, or it may be considered trespassing if you did so, or maybe you're a paparazzi press photographer and you want to photograph someone from a distance and you don't want to get in their face. I can appreciate these things, and those are circumstances where having a good zoom range is really helpful. But just remember that the atmosphere can always play a part in obtaining sharp images, and as long as you keep that in mind, I'm sure you'll be able to achieve the sharp images you want to achieve. Again, I know this has been a bit of a long video, and I do want to say thank you for everyone who's recently been subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, please remember to subscribe, because then and click the bell icon as well, so you'll be notified. I know YouTube has a habit of subscribing people and not making you aware of my upcoming videos, but hopefully as long as you subscribe, leave a comment and click on the bell, you'll be notified when I do a new video. So a big thank you for everyone that's watching. Have a nice day, and I hope you have a nice weekend, and just get out there. It's not always about the gear, ladies and gentlemen. Someone said to me, what's better, going to Africa and actually seeing the animals and taking pictures of them, or having a lens sit on your shelf doing nothing? Just think about that. Spend the money on the trip, get the images, rather than fork tons and tons of money out on big lenses. That's why I'm a big fan of the Sigmas and the Tamrons, these super zoom lenses they've brought out. And hopefully Canon will relent at some point and allow RF lenses to come out for those manufacturers. And we're waiting on some news at the moment as well on the R1 and the R5 Mark II. Again, there's a lot of YouTubers giving out misinformation out there. One of those being the ordinary filmmaker who gets it wrong all the time. Take those videos with a pinch of salt, and just wait for official announcements to come out by Canon. I will bring you the real information when it comes out and is available and it's definitive, because I don't like to play on rumours and give you misinformation. Anyway, thanks for watching, have a nice day, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.